Welcome to Smalltalk Daily for Wednesday, June 2nd, 2010. This morning we're going to complete our wrap-up on the UIPainter by going over form-level validation as opposed to field-level validation. What I mean by that is, on the previous screencast, when I put in a domain model underneath this UI, every time we tabbed or entered out of a field, that field flowed down to the domain model. Well, what if you wanted to have it flow down only at the end of the form process? You hit some additional button and then it does some check and it flows everything down. Well, what you want to do is you want to add something called buffered value holders. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to change the UI by adding this thing called a trigger to it. And so I'm going to generate instance variable accessors for that by going here and creating the accessors, which was a little off screen, but that's what I just did. And now what I'm going to do is go into the initialize method and I'm going to set up trigger as false as value. So it's just a trigger on a Boolean. So when it's false, things don't flow down. When it's true, things do flow down. The only other thing I need to do is go to these two aspects. And let's close the UI because I'm going to have to reopen it after I edit it a bit. I'm going to change these to use buffered value holders instead of just straight aspect adapters. And what that means is I'm going to wrap this whole thing up in a buffered value holder. So what I'm going to do is wrap my aspect adapter in what's called a buffered value holder. The buffered value holder has a subject, meaning the underlying thing that actually hooks me up to the domain model, which is the same aspect adapter I had before, and a trigger. So I tell it the trigger channel is the value holder on that Boolean. So whenever that Boolean's false, things aren't going to flow to the domain. When they're true, they are. Now all I need to do is change this. So I'm going to go ahead and toss the same exact thing in here. So I'll just paste this in from a different window, and I'll change this to phone. And now I will format this so that it looks semi-acceptable and hit Control S. And you can see that I have a small typo. So Control S, and that's that. So now I've got these things hooked up. The only thing I need to do is I need to add some code to the UI to toggle that event state from false to true. So let's go ahead and we'll go back to the class side of this, to the person UI. We'll go to the window spec and we'll edit it. What we're going to do is take a button, and there are many ways of doing this. I'm just going to do it in the simplest way possible. I'm going to toss a button here. What I'll do is I'll put in trigger form for the event, trigger form for the ID. I'll hit apply, and then I will just go ahead and hit install to install it. And then leaving this highlighted, so that's the only thing it'll define, I'll hit define. And now I'll close that down, and I'll go to the instance side, and I'll find my new method called trigger form. And all I really need to do here is this. I say self trigger value is true. So I toggle that from true to false, and that's all I need to do. At that point, my form will only update the underlying domain when I hit that button. So let's go ahead and see how that works. I'm going to go ahead and open up the UI, 456, and now I'm going to inspect, and we're going to go ahead and dive down to the model and go into the value. And you see that name and phone don't have anything in them. And that's because I haven't triggered anything. What I'm going to do now is leave that inspector up, and I'm going to hit the trigger. And now we'll go ahead and take a look at this, and you see they flowed down. And that's because by toggling that from false to true, I told the UI it's now fine to tell the domain, go ahead and update yourself. So if you need to have this level of form level updating, that's what you need to do. You need to come in here, change your aspects to holding buffer value holders on them, and trigger that change. And that could be triggered by some kind of validation thing where the form gets looked at on a field by field basis to check that all the fields are okay. There could be a number of things, but that's kind of an exercise left to your application. This is just the base capability. So that's about it for today. Until next time, have fun with Smalltalk.